Hello, I'm Greg Livingston, aka Golem, and I'm here with the developer of Confines of the Law. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Greg Lane from the studio Tin Heart Interactive.
All right. And to start off, how would you describe Confines of the Law?
It is a text adventure, not like a full text parser, but a sort of choose your own text adventure where the choices you make affect the outcome of the story.
It's a text adventure insofar as it's not graphical, it's about reading.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's much harder to pitch a game about reading to be like, hey, it's about reading. It's fun. So,
There are pictures, although I was dismayed there's no picture of an outhouse.
oh yeah, yeah. A lot of those pictures I took while I was in Long Island. I worked with a children's theater company for a number of years, and so Wild West was one of the themes that we did, and I took a bunch of pictures one year, and those all wound up being reused and recycled and reimagined for this project.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. The guy who's on top of the uh, I'm gonna
General
forget all
store?
the words. Yeah, the general store. Wow, you know the game better than me. That's awesome. Uh, that's my friend Adam Donahue. He does pixel art, and he and I have worked on a couple of projects before too. He's part of the Tin Heart Interactive group.
So is he on Right of Flight?
Yes, yeah, he did the pixel art for Right to Flight. His sister Shara did the polymer clay models for that game as well.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, mixed media has been sort of the heart of what we're looking at. We've talked about doing like an FMV with puppets or something to incorporate dance or just we're poking around some weird things right now.
So would you count it as mixed media to have real life pictures in a browser text adventure?
Yeah, yeah. I think I've thought of video games as sort of the Renaissance art of this generation. It sort of incorporates all of it. It incorporates programming and music and sound and pictures and story and language and so all of these things are possibilities for your toolbox as a game developer. So why not try them all out and smash them together and see what happens?
That's an exciting perspective.
Yeah. A lot of people, I think, get into it because they're really like, oh, I want to make this one particular game that I played when I was a kid, and I want to be inspired by all those games, but I kind of want to put a different spin on all of it. So hopefully, with a little something a little more in the moment of the zeitgeist of the times, I guess. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
If people played my games and said, "Oh, this reminds me of being a kid," if they list five, six, seven different games, they're like, "Oh, this reminds me of the old Doctor Brain games from Sierra," or if it reminds me of Carmen Sandiego or Oregon Trail or whatever. That would be much more exciting to me than being like, "Oh, this is a clone of such and such other game."
Well, it reminds me of John Wayne before anything else.
Mm. Yeah, my grandfather was a big John Wayne fan. It was the one thing that was really fun about this project. It was listening to a lot of old cowboy songs and trying to pull some flavor from there. I was listening a lot to Marty Robbins, and he does sort of like cheesy, hokey cowboy songs because it's like the '50s, I guess. So he did like Big Iron and songs about Texas Rangers and stuff like that. And I thought it was interesting because that song Big Iron, Johnny Cash does later in life as an older man, and it's got a different tone and a different flavor to it when you listen to that song.
Huh.
Um, so it was sort of just trying to pick up of these key songs and hearing them in different states to try to think about how that could actually affect the game. Like Ghost Riders in the Sky was another song I was listening to a lot, and Johnny Cash did that as a younger man, and that sounds a little cheesier. And Burl Ives, the guy who does like Silver and Gold from all the old stop motion like Rudolph movies and stuff like that.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, he did a version of Ghost Riders in the Sky, except like in the late '40s or something like that, and it's dark and creepy. So it's just interesting that there's a couple of these sort of touch points that if you hear alternate versions of the song, it just provided different inspiration for the game. And it was really those songs lived with me for the couple of months that I was working on this game. I'd listen to those in the car to and from as I was driving different places and just try to think about the world and stuff like that.
Try to immerse yourself in it.
Yeah, yeah. Walking around the house humming songs or singing songs with my wife is, I think, pleased that I kept some of that to myself. But
Um, and there are a lot of lovable one-liners in this game.
yeah, one of the things that working with a children's theater company, we did a lot of improv or a lot of like situational dialogue. So you needed to be really good with your vernacular. Sort of the exact opposite of what I've done with a couple of lines in this interview, but you you got to learn where your dialogue sits, and you learned exactly the right turn of phrase in order to keep the entire experience feeling like a united world. I think with that text adventure, you really rely on every word choice. So everything you say is really important to stay on task and keep the world feeling like it's flowing together.
Right, like you wouldn't want a city slicker suddenly to pop up in your game.
Precisely. And if you wrote in the newspaper man from Chicago or whatever, you would have to think about his particular background or what he would be saying or bringing to the landscape of language.
Okay, so you put a lot of thought into that.
I'll try to, yeah.
Regarding the game particulars about, I guess just to back up, it's a Western inspired game about catching a criminal who escaped from your town jail,
Mhm.
Elliot Halifax. And I was wondering, is Elliot always hiding in the same place?
In the current build, he's in one of two places. There's a point in the game where time changes. You start your adventure right on the cusp of sunset, and you've got about an hour to try to catch him, and then the sun sets, and then you have the next few minutes while you stumble through the dark and sort of make a last-ditch effort to try to find him. And he moves with that incoming darkness.
Oh, so that's why there's that separate achievement for catching him during the twilight.
Yes, yeah, because he shows up somewhere different in the game.
Okay. When it came to catching Elliot to clear the game, I just did it through brute force. Like, well, actually, it was kind of like a choose your own adventure book where, as a kid, I would never follow the rules and I would just kind of read out every option and choose the one that I liked the most.
Yes.
Uh, so, so in Confines of the Law, I just clicked on every link and figured it out by process of elimination. He wasn't in this place, or this place, so he must be in this last place I haven't checked.
Mhm.
But that's just kind of how I play every puzzle game.
Mhm.
Like, whether it's a Zelda game or if it's a point and click adventure or what have you. I'm not really good at internalizing the rules of a puzzle or gathering clues to solve a puzzle.
Mhm.
So I was wondering, is there a reasoning for Elliot's location? Like, do you expect players to figure out clues, or would you expect players to do more the brute force?
Um, so that was a question that actually came up a number of times this past weekend. I got to show the game off at Artscape, the Art and Culture Festival in Baltimore, which is a super fantastic event. I had never been before, so sort of to show up and show your game really allowed me to experience the full event 100%. So that was really fun. Um,
Although
so yeah,
it was raining both days, so that
a
usually it's
little
just
bit.
blisteringly hot.
Well, that just meant that all the people that were out at Artscape came into the University of Baltimore to come see us because we were inside.
Ah, okay.
So it's all a matter of perspective. So yeah. So one of the questions I got was how much logic is there internally in the world? Some of it is there underneath the hood, so some options aren't available unless you have like the right pieces of equipment. So there's a canteen, for example, and you can fill the canteen at the pond because that's where you would fill a canteen. The option isn't there to fill the canteen if you don't have the canteen, so you can't interact with the water at all until you get that prerequisite. Or if you find the lantern and the sun goes down, you have extra time after the sun goes down because you've got a lantern because it sort of illuminates the world around you. So some of those things are mechanically built into the game, and so the player doesn't really have much of a choice, but hopefully it reacts as true to life or as understandable to the player as possible. His location is not, I don't know if I have any guideposts or markers on where to find him. Some of that is intentional. Some of that I do want you to want the player to poke around and explore all the locations. But I got a really good suggestion to possibly put some more townsfolk in and do the whole NPC of like, I heard there's a witch's tower to the east of here, or just sort of like general one-liners that you sort of throw away. So I may put in some more NPC characters and build out the game a little further.
Okay. As you've tested this game, have you encountered different styles of play? Like, have you seen good players and bad players?
I, I've seen frustration. I think is more of a threshold. They either get it and feel that they're close, or get close and feel like I don't know where he is at all. It's almost on a person to person basis and it'd be interesting to map that to like some sort of personality test to be like, oh, if you didn't find him, or if you didn't choose the right endings at the end, if you didn't get the quote unquote best ending, what is your like regular outlook on life? Are you normally optimistic, pessimistic? Because I've seen players that are like two choices away or one choice away, and they wind up running out of time, and they just are like, that's it. I would have found him. I don't know where this guy's at. But yeah, it seems to be very personal, some of the reactions that people walk away with. One of the things that I added between the build that's currently on itch and the version that showed at Artscape was added in inventory. So I need to, that's on my to-do list for this upcoming weekend, is to update the itch build. The inventory hopefully should be more helpful because the map that you find in one of the places actually has little symbols, and they're all in relationship to where all the locations are. So hopefully if you open your map and look at the mini map, you can maybe place yourself in the world a little better.
Okay. Yeah, there. I guess I can't be too specific without spoiling it, but there's definitely one moment where I just assumed I had something in my inventory and it wasn't there.
Oh, in the bag in the end?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, yeah. There's some of the choices are deliberate in being red herrings. So sometimes you'll be presented a choice that's sort of a false choice, and it doesn't, your outcome doesn't totally matter. And other times, the choices are narrative. So the choice that you pick is trying to illuminate a lesson. I don't know if that makes sense. We can totally do spoilers. The game is 10 minutes to play through, so. Um,
I would just feel bad because I liked it so much discovering myself.
oh, okay. There's one part with, I guess, a couple of choices towards the end, and regardless of your choice, it always goes to the same spot. That was similar. That's the bag question. If you go to the other question at that point, you get presented with two options. I expanded it to four options just because I thought it'd be even sillier to just have to overwhelm the player with choice, and it's all meaningless choice. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I feel like that holds true for the most of the game in general, where like there's kind of a range of relevance, and some decisions are just completely null. Either they don't make any progress, or they outright kill you. And some choices
Mhm.
are like objectively, you want to do this, like you want to click yes on the first couple of prompts, for instance. But
Mhm.
there's somehow, even though it's a text adventure, there's still those choices that sit in between where it's like, well, do you really want the canteen? Is this going to help you? Because it does give you more time, but then it wastes time getting it. And the game still finds that space to have wiggle room for playstyle.
Yeah, the balance of distance between locations, I played around with a little bit, so that way hopefully it was tight enough that you felt like you had enough time to explore the entire space, but it had a short enough window that you didn't want to dawdle. And I wanted to keep the pressure on the whole time.
Right.
And that's sort of the reason why you get that extra 8 minutes at the end after the sun sets, because that sort of is a somewhat of a reprieve of like, oh, I can do it. I can make one more final push, and maybe we can solve the puzzle from there.
Yeah, there's a subtle difference in experience when you're told you have X number of minutes and then you have 8 extra, versus if you just had 68 minutes from the beginning. It's kind of like you put all your effort into clearing it in 60 minutes, and then
Mm-hmm.
like to know that you have just a little bit of wiggle room afterwards is nice.
Mm-hmm. Did you get all of the achievements?
I not in one run, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, they're not. I don't think it's possible. I think it's at least 3 runs to get all the achievements, and that's sort of why they went in, because it's a particularly short game. But I did want to show that there were several different endings, or a couple different ways to that the game could play out.
Yeah, and it was worth weeding those out. It wasn't like they were like the achievements definitely are descriptive enough that you can figure it out, and then the reward is worth it.
Mhm. I'd played some Twine games before, I guess, where they were mostly just. Oh, Twine is the engine that the game is built in. It's also apparently done in Baltimore. I haven't met the guy yet.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. So the guy who created Twine, and I'm gonna blank on his name, like a total jerk, apparently is in the Baltimore area, and I showed this game at one of the quick play tables at MagFest in January, and apparently missed my chance to run into him once or twice.
Oh,
So the people that I know the people that he knows, and we just someday we'll sit down and have a chat about the engine. It's fun. It's a great engine. It was super quick to pick up, and the CSS and the JavaScript stuff allowed me to add the images and break it down into 2 columns, and do some of the more mathy stuff, and which surprised me based on some of the other Twine games that I've played. I was able to add way more mechanics than I thought I would at first, and that really just tickled me pink. I was really excited about that.
well, that's cool. This would be my first Twine game, I guess.
Okay, yeah, yeah. There's a couple of really great ones out there. There's one called the uncle who, or my uncle who works for Nintendo, or the uncle who works for Nintendo, or something like that. Um, it's bizarre, but it's really worth a playthrough. It's really neat.
Okay, I think that covers everything on my mind. Were there any topics you wanted to cover that we haven't hit on yet?
Cool. Actually, I'm thinking about doing either adding a lot more, like 50% more to the game, or doing a sort of like a chapter two, like a next steps. Since the game goes from a little bit before sundown to a little bit after sundown, I want to do an overnight, including a midnight to sunrise, and I want to incorporate some of those weird West elements. I really really like jackalopes, because they're almost uniquely American in their mythology. I don't know if you know anything about jackalopes.
Not at all. I know that they are what they're hares with antlers, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah. So there's these cryptozoological creatures that live in the American Southwest, and they've got they're rabbits with antlers. They can yodel or howl, sing like a human's voice. So if you're out in the desert and you hear like howling or yodeling or whatever, that's could be a jackalope. They can only reproduce during lightning storms.
Huh.
So there's all these like bizarre things about jackalopes, and I think they're super amazing. And they're vaguely based on rabbits that get this disease where they wind up with these really hard, scaly growths coming out of their head. It looks actually kind of painful and quite debilitating,
Hmm.
but it's sort of the same way like people thought that manatees were mermaids at one point, you know. So, uh,
So weird.
yeah, cryptozoological things are super bizarre. I've got my own theory that the Jersey Devil, I grew up in New Jersey, so I think about this stuff a lot, that the Jersey Devil might have just been a bear with mange. So the Jersey Devil is described as this part horse with wings and leathery skin, and that's just the physical appearance. Like the whole background of it is also just stuff of folklore. But I don't know if you've ever seen a photo of a bear with mange. All the hair falls out, and it's just a black bear is just black underneath, and it looks sort of leathery, and
Huh.
the face shape is really elongated like a horse. So I could absolutely see if you were in the dark and you saw a mangy bear, and you're like, that thing could be the devil. So yeah, that just seemed like the most obvious answer to me. The same way like the manatees and these rabbits with this disease. It's sort of the human mind filling in the gaps and making things a little more exciting than they ought to be.
The Bigfoot produced out of fuzzy footage.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It's exactly like that.
All right. Well, that's actually so you were thinking about either expanding the current game or adding a chapter 2 onto it. What would be the difference there?
So one of the other titles that I had before Confines of the Law was selected, I actually put it to a vote. I put it on Facebook and Twitter, and they picked for me because I thought that would be a way better way to build hype about the game. So that really worked out. One of the other titles that we were kicking around was Twilight Pursuit.
Huh.
So it might be called Confines of the Law Twilight Pursuit. And so I don't know if it'll be a chase in reverse or if it'll be a full-on chase where Elliot moves, might skedaddle away from you, and then you have to chase him from place to place in a much more like not guided but content heavy. Like, oh, here's broken leaves if you go this way, or here's muddy footprints if you go the other way. Or you might be the one fleeing, and you'll have to escape. You know, maybe some ghost herd in the sky or something, and pull that reference back in. But we'll see it.
Whereas the current game here is more open-ended and you can go anywhere at any time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we might go into a like full on like Act 2 chase action movie, you know, but with reading. So
Yeah. That counts.
yeah.
So on a more general note, when it comes to video games, which is the most important? The intention of the designer, the experience of the player, or the game itself?
Oh, I would say the experience of the player. Video games are like a play. You can write a script and you can do a dress rehearsal, but a play is not a play without an audience, and a game is not a game without a player.
That makes sense. It's the act of playing that makes it a game.
Yeah, you can play with something that is not a toy, like the verb to play. You can find rocks outside and you can play with a rock or whatever. You can play with a clipboard or something that is not designed as a toy or not designed as a game. The art of play comes from the human interaction and I guess the pieces of your imagination that fill in the experience. And so games are the same way. There's a lot of if I think Extra Credits did an episode on it very recently about like negative space in games where you allow your imagination to fill in some of the gaps, and that makes the experience all the more real for you. You can listen to some of the podcasts of the guys who did like the old Infocom games where years later somebody would go up to them and say, "Hey, I played your game and I loved how you described the lush jungle with all the animal sounds and everything." Infocom used to make old text adventure text parser games and stuff.
Yeah.
And so people would like gush over like how many details and how vivid this world was. But then if you go back and read those lines, it was like you enter the jungle. And then your options are like climb tree or look tree or move north. Like the world was not as detailed as people remember it, but they're allowed to play in that space with their imagination and it becomes real for them. So I think the player is the most important part of game development.
Okay. The descriptions and confines of the law are definitely more than just you're in a jungle.
Right.
All right. Well, thanks for talking with me tonight.
Absolutely. This was a blast. This was super fun.
Glad to hear. Is there anything you'd like to plug?
You can find me on Twitter. Yeah, Tin Heart Interactive is on Twitter at underscore Tin Heart. We're on Facebook, Tin Heart Interactive. I think we're on Tumblr and itch.io for Tin Heart Interactive. There's two games up there. There's Confines of the Law, which is the Wild West text adventure. There is Right to Flight, which is a point-and-click adventure game done in polymer clay and pixel art. And I think that's about it. I'm sure I'm missing something, but
And Right to Flight is as zany as Confines of the Law is. Right to Flight is just off the wall, completely off the wall.
yeah, we did. That one's fully voice acted too. It's my friend Henry. He plays in a band. He and DJ who did some of the programming as well on Right to Flight. They play in a band called Keep Flying, and it's awesome. They're playing Warp Tour in a couple of weeks. They're playing, or not in a couple of weeks. I think in a couple of days. Pardon me. This is the last run of Warp Tour. I used to play in a band with those guys before I got into game development full time, and it's a great life, and I really miss it. So yeah, so if you're interested in new music, there's a band called Keep Flying, and you should go check them out too.
Cool.
And Shara's work is called Mad Dash, and so she and her husband Zane, so she does the polymer clay. Zane was around for the Right to Flight project, and he like made us homemade bagels from scratch. He's awesome. He's super cool.
He was
So
the catering on set.
yeah, and my wife helped a lot with some of the puns. She is very very punny, and she's very clever. So she's a super blast to talk to, and she's super supportive. She and her sister helped the whole setup that we had at Artscape. They helped with the feedback board, and Lisa, my wife's sister, painted the couple of paintings that we had there. She did a full painting of one of the pieces of art in the game
Oh, wow.
on canvas, and she did the studio, the Tin Heart Interactive logo on canvas as well. And yeah, and they ordered the pens that were there, which helped with our email sign up list. So yeah, it's been a real effort. It's not just me. It's I've got an army of fantastic people that I truly love, and I really like working with them.
Cool. Well, thanks for talking with me tonight.
Yeah, Greg, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much.